Hey everybody, and welcome to Command Value 1, Episode 4. Tonight we have a special guest. We're joined... Dave, what time is it for you right now?
It is 11:13 p.m. for me right now. Haven't had a coffee in a while, but I'm all good.
So we're keeping you up late tonight. I don't know that you need an introduction. You've designed and created this entire universe that really the first 3 episodes of this podcast have been pretty much completely dedicated to. So we're going to bombard you with a series of questions tonight, and hopefully this will be fun.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Looking forward to it. Nice to talk to some people.
You're still chained to the desk, though, I understand, right?
Very much. But yeah. I mean, some like just casual gaming talk is something I don't get to do that often now because I'm in real like hardcore shut away sculpting mode, which is good. I like that. But this is nice.
Yeah, I heard you make a comment at Gen Con. Something like 3/4 of the stuff you've sculpted still hasn't seen the light of day.
Oh yeah, probably for hours put in. I would say 3/4 since since the whole TT thing started. Yeah, probably people have only seen 1/4 of what I've done so far. I've done more sculpting this year in the last 12 months than I've managed in the last 2.5, 3 years almost.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah, I've been very, very busy. I mean, I probably maybe 97% of my hours have been spent sculpting. That's probably a realistic estimation. So there's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's just put it that way.
Is that the part of the job you enjoy most, the sculpting versus the rule or fluff writing?
I love writing rules and fluff too, but what I tend to do is do them in a big block all at once. Especially fluff. Like I tend to, when I do a fluff book, I'll sit there and just write fluff non-stop for 2 weeks or whatever it needs, and then edit it down. I don't do it piecemeal. So at the moment, because there's not a lead time on fluff, you write fluff, you've got to check it, and then it goes in a book. Whereas miniatures need to be molded, produced,
right.
So it's miniatures first, fluff second, for Battle for Earth and other things.
Battle for Earth. We still thinking April for that?
Yeah, something like that. That's we don't have a release date officially yet, but that's vaguely what's being aimed for, as we said at Gen Con. Nothing's really changed as far as the aims and everything. So what I said at Gen Con still holds for now. I mean, I'm really excited about it. It's been a hell of a lot of work has gone into that book. It's going to be easily the best book that you've seen for the Drop Zone, Drop Fleet, the universe. There's going to be a hell of a lot of stuff in it.
It's going to be huge.
It is. Getting it all to fit in is probably going to be the challenge, but I don't do book assemblies. So that's not my problem. He said.
And if people want to get an idea of what Battle for Earth might end up like, they can check out the new Carnivale book. That's the quality level that we're aiming towards for that book. It's not better.
Be a significant step up, and there's not going to be it's sort of an all killer no filler kind of thing, because there's a lot of good stuff in there, so there just isn't going to be room for anything that doesn't want to be in that book. That's how I see it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Don threw out name drop for Carnivale there, so I'm going to bounce through the bullet point list and get to the part where we can just talk to you about all the great stuff. Carnivale is finished or about finished fulfilling its Kickstarter. Is that correct, Don?
It's right at the very end of it. If I'd be surprised if nothing is even left at the end of the week. And then they've already done a post about pre-order coming soon. Woo. So everybody will be able to get the retail sales for that as well coming up.
And if people aren't familiar with Carnivale, can you give an elevator pitch on what it is?
So Carnivale is a 28mm skirmish size game. It plays out. It's a Phoenician horror kind of theme or whatever. So you're playing more or less in the Phoenician environment with canals and stuff like that going on. And its biggest draw is the movement of the characters in the game. So you can climb up the rooftops, jump between roofs, jump canals. You can drown people in the game. Just all kinds of cool mechanics. you don't typically see it. So it's very fluid and just lots of different ways. There's no one way to get around a mission. And then
Like acrobatic might be a good word.
Parkour.
yeah, I guess you could say acrobatic. And then there'll be swimming and stuff in the game as well, obviously with there being a big water element in the game. And then mission-wise, I've not personally seen all the missions myself yet, but I know that they're seem to be driven more towards faction-specific type missions than just generic. Here's a couple objectives, like you see in most types of games. So it'll be fun and more story-driven. And then so we'll talk more about that towards the end and how we might get the actual producer of the game on and stuff like that.
All right. Well, the other big what's new is, what is it, a half dozen new buildings for the MDF line for Drop Zone?
Yeah, quite a bit of new releases. Even some showing off a bit of acrylic on there as well. Just
yeah, that $200 table deal from the cons is looking shinier and shinier every minute now, because they should be sitting right around 13, I think it is, buildings for Drop Zone.
Something like that, from what I can remember.
And if you throw in a couple of fours, you could deck out your entire table and not repeat a building once.
I'm personally pretty excited to put together a couple of those. The was it the base, the large base that's, I think they're saying it's going to be one large structure and 8.
Oh, correct. Yeah, the really huge building. Yeah.
Yeah.
That one's gonna be a project.
Yeah, time thing put into it, but it's really cool looking.
Well, let's slip right into game recaps here. Don, you played a 2,500 point version 2 monster game against Rasmus last week over at the Dragon's Roost. How'd that go?
Yeah, it was pretty fun. It's been a very, very long time since I played a game like that.
8 Phobos, I understand.
Yeah, that was a hellish to deal with. I don't think I played 2,500 points since Simon was around with Hawk, to be honest with you. So it's been quite a couple of years, I think.
I've only played a game that large once with Jordan.
So that's pretty fun. You think ahead of time, I can use all the toys, but even at 2,500 points, because of the nice range that's already available for Drop Zone, you're still leaving a few things off the table you'd like on there.
Did you lose?
Well, we tied technically in the game, but then he took it over on kill points. So it was
that's what PHR does.
So he basically had a anti-air brick on the table, and then I foolishly brought a lot of air against PHR. So, but yeah, that's fun. I got to get the tilt rotors out there against Strike Hawks, so 2 of those out there. And by the way, Dave, those are probably my new favorite unit in the last couple of years.
Cool.
No, I hate the Resistance, and I love them.
It's one of my favorite sculpts that I've done in the last couple of years. I'm glad it's getting some time on tables because it's a cool model, I think.
Yeah, it's even at 120 points as it currently sits, it's still like no question I'm going to take that. At least one of those every game.
Well, you compare it price-wise to your other options for the amount of bases it can hold. It's not really that expensive, because when you had a Kraken in 2 buses and having to fill them, or even your Lift Hawk and 3 Jacksons, it's a very similar point investment for your transport.
And you're getting all the weapon, the huge wave of rockets coming off it as well. So
wait, there are troop transports that carry more than 2 bases?
Yeah, you don't know that, do you?
Nope.
Sorry about that.
That didn't feel very sincere at all, Dave.
Not really.
Okay, yeah, but that was a lot of fun, and I mean, it always takes a while to get through a game like that, but it's a thinker too, because you got so much table space. It's a 6x4, obviously, for a game that size, and
it was fun too with you guys playing that, because I had 2 demo tables going, and the one guy was on his 3rd demo game, and the other 3 guys, it was their first game, and they kept kind of drifting back to your table, and it's just like, I can't believe all the crap on that table.
yeah.
That's one of the nice things. Like, I think it's one of the reasons that 40K always impresses people from a distance, because of the toys on the table.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to see that with Drop Zone with bigger games. That's something, obviously it doesn't necessarily work logistically for a tournament, but I'd like to see more big games played. I mean, the game's designed to scale up like that pretty seamlessly.
And it does too, yeah.
Perfectly well at 1250, like 2,500, but you got to work for it, and it keeps your brain busy. But that's part of the fun. I think so, anyway.
Agreed.
Then again, this is a guy who used to build Couple Titans and play a game on my entire living room floor that took a whole weekend to get through. This is teenage Dave from a long time ago, but we've all been there probably at one point or another.
My problem is just investing 4 or 5 hours into a game is a hard time sink with the 3 Rugrats. Jordan, you said you played Aaron?
I did. So we ended up calling it, I think, shortly after turn 4, maybe beginning of turn 5. It was a very close game. I think the thing with my experience with the Dreadnoughts is around that time frame in a game, there's kind of a deciding point, a make or break, if you will. I lost my Dreadnought, and he lost his battleship right around the same time. We literally called the game when I had 2 destroyers left and my troop ships, and he only had his troop ships left. So it was a pretty deadly game. There was a lot of some of the critical hits that happened and stuff. It was a lot going on pretty quick. It was a lot of fire.
Did Aaron have his Republic or Shaltari fleet out?
Republic.
Okay. Well, those troop ships are still gunships.
Yeah.
Dreads are getting a lot of use, Dave, so you'll be happy to know that those scopes are not sitting and collecting dust.
I spent a very long time on those. So, yeah, I want to see them played. I didn't slave away at those for weeks at a time for each ship to not see them get some table time.
I mean, point-wise, my general feel is they seem to be right where they need to be too, because they're overpowering, but they're not overpowering. Having one doesn't seem to win it for you or lose it for you. They seem to be
what we were aiming for. I mean, those rules got bounced back and forth an awful lot because they were a really important thing to get right. A lot of games, it's actually the big stuff and the really small stuff are the 2 things to watch out for most in rules. Because really small stuff, obviously, if you get that wrong, you end up with version 1.0 Wolverine scenario, which anyone who remembers the very start of Drop Zone will remember that. The danger of a cheap unit that's not properly balanced.
Mm-hmm.
But equally, if you end up, having these big units take over completely, then you've got a game where you must be fielding 1 or 2 of them before you can even have a hope. And then it doesn't look like an army game anymore. So you've got to get that right. I've always said, I'd like to go around a tournament maybe and see maybe half or possibly 2/3 of the tables maybe taking a Dreadnought, but not every single one. It needs to be pretty viable to not take a Dreadnought, but also if you want one, it needs to deliver because it's a great big expensive model in points and money and hobby time because it's huge. You want it to kick ass. You don't want it to die on turn 1.
Yeah.
We've all been there with certain games where you spent forever painting your massive, great big central unit, and then on turn 1 it gets blown up, and you're like, well, that was fun. So nobody wants that.
Yeah, Derek didn't want that the last fleet game we played each other.
Hey, 3 turns, man. 3 turns, and it absorbed the weapons free of an Avalon twice and your London. So it did okay.
3 turns of concentrated fire. Yeah, that's fine. If it dies, then yeah.
No.
2 turns of concentrated fire, 3 turns on the table.
It was 1 activation of my battleship and 2 activations of my Avalon.
Yeah.
My Dreadnought and Avalon.
I mean, the Avalon's a real ship killer anyway, if it's in the right position. I hate
Yeah.
Well, those things anyway.
Yeah,
I was in a very bad position. Is what it turned into. I didn't zig hard enough, and
yeah, he was in the perfect position, and I went weapons free with the London on him with mass driver volley.
Yeah, and that's going to sting.
yeah,
Then followed it up with the Avalon, and then first activation next turn. I don't even think I needed to use all the shots of the Avalon the second time.
no. Well, and my dice crapped the bed on me, and I was gonna try to slink forward and deal with the Avalon, and I hit you like twice with the burn through, and then it fizzled off. So
Yeah, it didn't help that what you almost double snake eyed, like you did 3 damage out of your possible 15, 20.
right. You know what it did do though is it gave us that wonderful video of you rolling like 48 dice for the London.
Oh yeah, it's like we on again. I think it's still it has the most dice, doesn't it, of anything potentially, the London, I think, in the game at the moment.
I can't think of anything that's close to having that or more.
Most dice, like not the highest of dice, but a shed load of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
In the right situation, if you got the broadside both sides with
The Romulus.
yeah, you might.
Yeah, similar. Better dice though, Romulus. Or either of. Yeah.
Well, Dave, I don't know if you're aware, we have a local Scourge morale officer. We call him Overlord Shivak.
No, I don't know.
He's running a tournament in January, and he has designed a bombardment mission. And that's all to preface the game I played this past weekend was with Patrick, and we played 1,500 points, and it was PHR versus PHR. But he brought a Remus.
No.
The Remus with the Apocalypse cannons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the mission was all about destroying sectors, and he literally destroyed the entire board.
It's for we will never make a orbital bombardment ship that's more effective than that one.
I don't think you possibly could.
Yeah.
I didn't take a dreadnought because mine's still in the box. It needs painted. But in place of that, I packed it with like a pair of Orions and a quartet of Europas. I thought that's a solid bulk of fire to dump into anything.
Yeah.
And I did finally take his dreadnought out, mostly with destroyer and battleship fire. I brought a trio of Jasons and my 6 Echoes up on it, and that's what ultimately killed it.
Yeah.
And he overloaded the drives and destroyed everything around it when it went down.
Yeah.
But yeah, that thing's a planet killer.
Yeah, I mean that gun is as big as a light cruiser almost on the model, so it needs to hurt. But any orbital bombardment needs to be overpowered anyway because you won't always get to use it. So it's one of those kind of, if that's what that ship is built around, it better really be good at that job, otherwise it's not usable.
What was really cool is he got it right up on my Heracles, and he fired all 4 torpedoes at it.
Nice.
I mean, it wasn't cool for me, but it was really nice to see torpedoes tear a ship apart. Like,
I mean, when you got 4 of them,
right?
They're going to land, and there's going to be some damage done at that point. There's no other way of looking at it. It's going to hurt unless you're incredibly unlucky.
Well, that's how I roll. I'm incredibly unlucky. Well, let's bounce out of the game recaps and over to the hobby stuff. Dave, do you want to start us off? Do you have hobby time you want to talk about?
I do and I don't. So yeah, remember I spend probably 3/4 of my waking hours on planet Earth sculpting miniatures. You know, literally that's like all I do. So when it comes to free time, like I still love the hobby and I love miniatures, but I don't generally do it for fun these days. I enjoy my job, but you got to have some balance. Mm-hmm. But having said that, I love building stuff. Like you saw the Avenger. You know, the Avenger is fueled mostly by my love of building stuff.
Yeah, where's she at lately?
She is at TT in Cornwall. There are plans for her at the moment. She needs some rebuilding work because the shows took a toll a little bit, and I used it's a bit of an error on my part. I left it too long between building it and painting it. it was such a big project. It built up some sort of things like fingerprint residue and dust and stuff.
Gotcha.
Spraying it. About a year later, the spray started to come off and lift in places, which is a real bugger. So
Yeah.
you know, it needs some work really before it can come back out. But it is still there, and we've still got it, and it is going to be coming back, which is good because I put in nearly 1,000 hours into that model.
Wow.
So it needs to be seen again. But you know, anyway, so yeah, I love building stuff. So what I do otherwise is I do quite a bit of Nerf modding, or at least I used to, up until my wife has put her foot down on it a little bit. So this is like taking stock Nerf guns, taking them apart and rewiring them, putting in much better batteries, repainting them. So it's a lot of very similar hobby skills, you know, plus the electronics. You know, I use all my wargaming paints to do it. So it's a similar thing. I like it because the results are fairly fast and quite impressive. So I don't have a ton of free time anyway. You know, I'm married and I spend most of my free time with my wife, to be honest. So like when I do get hobby time, it needs to deliver quite fast. You know, if you don't know much about what you can do with Nerf modding, it's pretty unbelievable, to be honest. You can get, with maybe 4 hours work, you can turn something that's mall bolt and not very good to something that can put out 12 bullets a second. And it sounds incredibly angry. You know, kind of it's yeah. Any war gamer is going to love the noise it makes.
I'm keeping you away from my 10-year-old because if he hears that, he's going to want one.
Oh no, yeah, you see it. Like the first time I saw it, I think it was on YouTube. I saw somebody did it, and I was like, "Oh my god, I've got to do that." Yeah, that's fun. I've got like a whole armory of these things. I don't really use them for anything. Like we have a big, like New Year's Nerf battle usually at my brother-in-law's house, and they all come out for that. But other than that, they're mostly just for the sake of making them. Now I've got one with a digital ammo counter. I've got ones with all like red dot sights, lasers on them, all kinds of stuff, just for the hell of it.
Awesome.
I built a lightsaber this year as well, and that was hard. That was the hardest hobby thing I've done for ages. That was like a scratch build with a NeoPixel blade and programming and all that kind of thing. I made it from bulbs and bits of torch and all kinds of things. That was hard. I don't think I'd try that again. I did do it. It works, and you can change the color of the blade, and it retracts, and all the things it's meant to do. But
oh, cool.
Yeah, I mean that thing is a beast. It's a two-hander, like a big long-bladed kind of lightsaber. But again, that was just for the hell of it, really.
Well, the important question is what color was the blade?
Any color you want it to be.
Oh.
Any color. It's programmable, so you can change it live. I've got it set on green at the moment. Green is brightest to the human eye, so green's the best color to leave it on. But you can change it. You can have anything, like even like pink and teal and stuff like that.
I'm always kind of an orange guy myself. I don't know why.
Yeah, you can have. It works. It's got the blade has something like 400 LEDs in it, and they're all independently programmable from a chip. So chip sends a signal down the blade, and you get the pew as it comes out, and then you can change the colors and everything because they're all RGB. They're like pixels basically. And it's pretty fun. Anyway, not easy to do from scratch, but it is doable. There was a tutorial I found online and just followed it and prayed. Yeah. But yeah, with miniatures, I haven't built any miniatures for ages. Like I haven't actually got my hands on dreadnoughts yet.
Oh, you still didn't get you none?
No, well, I just pick them up when I go to Cornwall. I haven't been to Cornwall for a while, so
Okay.
just pick them up. I ask nicely, and then they give them to me. When I get my hands on some dreadnoughts, hopefully, then I'll be building those because I want them on my desk. I just just to have there. I probably won't paint them, but I'll build them.
I don't know. You get 4 of them on your desk, you might not have room for much else.
I've got a fairly clear desk right now. Actually, my old office I have like loads of models all over the place, and now I've got what have I got? I've got a Viper Mark 7 Battlestar one. all painted up on a stand. That's on my speaker. I've got BB-8 on its little frame. I've got weirdly a little stand of the sword of Mehmed the Conqueror from Istanbul. This is where I went on holiday this year. I've got a metal Sonic the Hedgehog and some other miniatures. I've got a bunch of destroyers and stuff like that on my desk as well. But that's about it. So yeah, there's room for dreadnoughts. Oh yeah, and the DeLorean. I've got a DeLorean as well. Back to the Future one, obviously. Film one.
That Viper, are we talking original series or reboot? Oh, you said Mark 7, so that's the reboot, yeah.
Yeah, I like I love that series. It did go a little bit weird around season 3, but apart from that, yeah. And a little bit
but
weird.
that first episode of season 3 where it drops into orbit and then jumps, that was pretty sweet.
Oh yeah. I really enjoyed Battlestar. I miss it. It was fun. It was one of the best.
It was good stuff.
I thought.
Well, Don, say again, Dave. I'm sorry.
I've never seen the original series though.
I don't know that you're missing a lot.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit too retro for its own good by the look of it.
Yeah, it did not age well.
Yeah,
it did not.
The original series aged a lot better than Battlestar 84.
That's very true. I'd say maybe the premiere movie might be worth seeing just for the nostalgia sake of it, but after that, you can probably go without it.
Yeah.
Well, Don, do you have any hobby to report?
Yeah, I've actually been quite busy. So this is sort of my quote unquote off season. So this is where I'll get the largest chunk of my display painting done between now and probably March when Adepticon hits. I've had to veer away from Zone and Fleet because I have literally no Rumble Slam and certainly no Carnivale painted yet. So I finished up the Back Alley Brawl set because I really needed like a palette cleanser after the Sheltari Dreadnought. And
sorry about that.
So I went with what looked like the most fun, and this had like a motorcycle and a car and stuff like that, just silly things in there. And so I went that route just so I could have a little bit of fun and then get kind of geared back up to doing some more serious stuff, which landed on my doorstep at the end of last week. Actually, it was a boatload of Carnivale stuff showed up for me to be working on. So that will probably be taking up pretty much the rest of my year and beginning of next year.
But you're looking forward to it.
That's about it. I am actually, because I haven't painted 28mm figures in a little while. I've done a little bit of Rumble Slam, but that's kind of heroic, so it's not true 28mm scale. So I am looking forward to doing this, and then since I have everything at once, I can do an entire faction at once, so I can keep them all kind of looking tied together.
A little bit of batch painting for you there.
Yeah, somewhat. And then when it comes to the Richard and the fish dudes, I can kind of go off and do a little one-off here and there. I mean, obviously the shark guy isn't going to look the same as the regular Richard-looking dudes, so.
Yeah, but the land shark is awesome.
Yeah, I am looking forward to painting a land shark, especially if he's eating somebody, so that's pretty cool. I don't get to do horror elements to my painting very much lately. Spaceships don't really call for blood splatter.
Yeah.
So that's going to be about it. So probably every hobby section from here on out for the next foreseeable future will be just updates on that project.
Well, at least you have updates on that project, unlike Jordan. Does Jordan have any projects you'd like to update us on?
So the project of being able to even possibly get back to hobby, and between crazy amounts of work and unpacking everything else, I hadn't found time to be able to get the hobby area set up. I moving house. I think I have, I don't know, 20 good sized boxes of hobby stuff to unpack, and when the wall's not up and the desk isn't there. It doesn't make a lot of sense to unpack, so it kind of puts the brakes on doing any of that. But I finally got a hand on getting the wall up, and I could actually, get that step done. Finished up all my electrical for the area yesterday, so started to unpack, but I got quite a bit more to do.
So as one of the people that helped Jordan move, I can say that he did have more hobby stuff than he did clothing and dishes and household goods.
We've all been there.
Maybe I have a problem.
Maybe.
We all have a problem of one kind or another, like with stuff in general. Yeah, I sold a lot of in my 40k days. That was when it was bad. That was when it was really bad. I had a lot of models that were never going to see a table ever. It just kind of point where it was like, right, I'm selling this lot, and I've never had that many miniatures since, unless you count the Avenger. When but you don't.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta learn the lesson of not being a collector, if you will.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've gotten over that hump yet.
Yeah,
well,
I mean, there's a good, like, healthy collecting element, and then there's buying miniatures that you're never going to even build.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a balance in there. I think I've always bought miniatures that I've liked, even though I know I'm not going to use them. But I've got to be building them, otherwise there's just no point.
Yeah. I think the advent of Kickstarter makes it really easy to be like, oh, it's only $100 for Bones 4. And
Right.
You'll get like 10 million miniatures that you're not going to paint there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or the zombie sides are another good one. Like if you get all the stretch goals and it's your third zombie side game.
Yeah.
By God, I will have Green Horde painted before Invader delivers. I'm putting that out there.
Deep dip them. It's all good.
I tend to do that too. Like my biggest thing that I really love is Nurgle stuff. I'll never play a game of 40k with it, but I just love the grossness of it. I'm a big horror fan, so that would be something I'd collect just to paint only.
Yeah. No, that was me with I think my Eldar were like that. Like I did play some games with them when I did play 40k a long time ago. I was a Tau player. This is 3rd edition, so it's a different kind of world to what it is now. But yeah, I had some like pretty Eldar models that I had just because we all do. And that's fine. It's not really any different to making other model kits.
No.
Models, as long as they're good ones.
Well, I'm taking a break from my Shaltari. I've been painting a lot of Shaltari lately, and I'm working on Nazis right now. So I started a bolt action German Panzer Grenadiers, and now I'm waiting on more of them to show up. I've got like a dozen Panzer Grenadiers and a Panther 4 done. Dragged Don into bolt action with me.
28 mil, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. How big's a Tiger in 28? That's fairly sizable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good size. I have a Panther, and I was kind of surprised how big it... Or not a Panther, I'm sorry. I have a Panzer 4, and I was kind of surprised by how big it wasn't.
Yeah, Panzer 4 is pretty titchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Panther's definitely on my list. I don't know if I'm going to go for a Tagger, because it's quite a point hog.
Yeah.
I think it's literally half of a list to bring a Tagger in.
Yeah, but might it be one of those models that you'll never play with, but you want to paint?
I mean, I'm not saying it's not, but I figure I should get a couple of games in first.
If you're Panzer Grenadiers, like there kind of needs to be a Tiger there somewhere. Like
Right.
feel like there should be.
I mean, if you guys are trying to talk me into it, it's not like you're going to have to work hard to convince me.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's all the regular stuff out of the way. Now we can go straight into all of the wonderful topics that the community threw out when we said we were going to get to talk to you, Dave.
Cool.
So let's just dive right in. In other podcasts, I've heard you comment that you're a bit of an Iron Maiden fan.
Yeah, very much. Got all their albums. Been see them quite a few times live. Went recently actually. They were playing at the O2. The Legacy of the Beast tour. Went to that, which was cool.
Awesome.
I just love Maiden. Like they're an institution, and there'll never be another band like that.
You have to pick one song, Dave. What's that one Iron Maiden song?
I'll give you 3 because you can't just have one. They're like too long. So of the classics, Aces High.
Yeah.
Which is I would go for that over some of the ones the Beast, which is what you're supposed to say, but no, Aces High. I like Planes as well, so that fits.
Yeah.
Left field choice, Be Quick or Be Dead, from Fear of the Dark album. I like that song. It's got a nice anti-fat cat political message as well, which I think is quite cool. And from the new stuff, I would go for Empire of the Clouds, which if you probably don't know that one, you might. It's 20 minutes long.
I don't know if I know that or not.
Which is not for Maiden at all. Like you'll never see it play live or anything, but it's brilliant. It's from the latest album, and it's just fantastic. It's like as a piece of music, it's wonderful. It's not typical Maiden at all, but it's great. It kind of shows what they're capable of. But yeah, those are my 3 not random songs. But with Maiden, there's so much that you could do that 4 times and justify 3 songs easily.
As I say, you didn't even skip a beat. You were prepared for that.
Yeah, no, I asked a few of these questions, and that one I gave some thought to purely because I was, what I choose. It's like it's difficult, yeah, but I do love Maiden and metal in general. Like I do listen to other music, but it's metal mostly. And if you're doing CAD, metal is where it's at. Yeah.
You said Aces High, and that's the first song I always think of when I think of Maiden.
Yeah, I think it's usually Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight, Number of the Beast. That's those ones that people gravitate to.
Pretty much the Best of the Beast album.
Yeah, like the if you live albums, Flight 666 is very good. Live After Death is the best one. Everyone knows that. That's like the live. Oh, that's offensive.
Oh, good lord.
Yeah, that's not me.
No,
Don.
That's not me.
That was me.
Oh, come on, Jordan.
No worries.
All right, Dave. If and when you get free time and you could play and wanted to play a game, what would it be?
Right, so I'm going to say I'm going with non-TT stuff because then it's sort of, obviously I wish I could have more time playing my own games, which sounds silly, but I don't actually get that many opportunities to do it. So
well, you made a couple of good games, so I mean I couldn't blame you for wanting to play them.
I'd like to play them like full on casually. The problem is like it never is because there's always some kind of reason to be playing. Like I don't get to play a game just for the hell of it. I think if I was going to play another war game of some description, and this is boring, but I think I'd like to play 40k. It's a boring choice just purely because I've not played 40k for what would it be, 15 years now, I think.
Oh, gee, well, an 8th edition is a completely different animal, so.
Oh yeah, I mean the last time I played was 3rd Ed again, so I'd like to play that just purely for nostalgia, but only if it was completely non-competitive. And if I was playing somebody else with the same mindset, which is like paint up a nice army that looks cool, that looks like a proper army, that kind of matches the fluff, and have fun, and don't take it seriously. As long as it was that, I think I'd enjoy it. Otherwise, I'd hate the competitive scene there. Like I wouldn't want to be involved, I think. But what do I know? I have not played it for 15 years.
Let's see. Ryan wants to know, what is your favorite sculpt that you've done? Perfection, if you want to get froggy.
Are we going drop zone or drop fleet or both?
Let's start with zone because I have a bias.
Zone, right? Okay, so UCM Phoenix, definitely. But I grew up on Thunderbirds, and there's a bit of Thunderbirds there.
I can see it.
Sheltari, I think Fire Drake, or actually probably the Frost Drake, just because I think it's marginally cooler. Then you've got then what? PHR. I would probably go the Neptune. I think like a lot of people like the Neptune, even though it's just a drop ship. You know, it's my favorite PHR model. Probably for Scourge, I'm gonna go weird and go Annihilator.
That is a cool model.
I know a lot of people hate that model. It's a real. There's a Brit phrase, Marmite. Do you guys know that?
I don't.
It's a crappy spread, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a crappy spread. I personally hate Marmite. If you say something is Marmite, the thing about Marmite is you either love it or you hate it. There's no middle ground on Marmite. You don't want meet anyone who's like, "Oh, Marmite's all right." It's a bit like that, but I like it because it's weird and out there, and there isn't really anything that looks like it. And as a designer, I like that, even though it is a bit funky, and there's plenty of people who hate it. Resistance, definitely the Lift Hawk, I think, for Resistance.
Yeah, that is a cool model.
Yeah, like I spent a lot of time on that one, like at the design stage, and because the core dropship is a really important model in every range. But yeah, I really like the Lift Hawk. That's always been my favorite Resistance model.
It's definitely the best looking of all the core medium-sized dropships too.
Agreed.
Got a good World War II kind of feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
I would the tilt rotor in close second now because I love the tilt rotor as well, like I said, but I think the Lift Hawk just takes it for me.
There's a guy, and Don will have to try to send you a picture of it, who did a mod for a Desolator that he posted today in the Facebook group. That's Rich from Green Stuff Industries, right?
I don't recall.
I'm pretty sure it was. He took all the legs off the bottom and replaced them with tentacles.
Yeah.
And they're lifting up the trailer of one of the civilian semis.
Nice.
And that's what's used for the base of the model. Just very, very subtle kind of change, but ridiculously cool looking. It was a nice mod.
No, that's cool. Like if you remember the original book, there's the Desolator with the lightning underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine from university did that. I think that's a really cool bit of work on the Desolator, even though it's from ancient now. I've always liked that model.
Is it ancient? I mean, it's only like 5 years old. It's not that ancient, is it?
No, I suppose it feels like it for me. It's been a long 5 years. Although it's actually been more than that for me. It's been 9 years because of all the development time before release. No, you're talking about like the start of 2009 onwards, I think, something like that. But yeah. For on favorite models, Drop Fleet. Do I do Drop Fleet?
Sure.
I'm probably going to be very simple on this. All the Dreadnoughts. Because they're recent, and I really went to town on them.
A lot of blood, sweat, and tears there, right?
Yeah, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I have other ships that I like from Drop Fleet, but yeah, the Dreadnoughts. I think like if I put work on a pedestal, like I put those on a pedestal as far as my sculpting goes. As kind of this is the best I can do at the moment, and that's where they are, I think.
Well, he asked a follow-up question. He wants to know also what the greatest influence in developing the Dropverse has been for you. I think he means like film and literature. Yeah.
So Aliens is obviously a fairly big one. Still love that film. That's one of the films I can watch an infinite number of times and never get bored with. I like the long cut. I just think it's better.
Yeah. I'm sitting here nodding my head along with you.
But yeah, there's a lot of things that come from various places. PHR is very Ghost in the Shell, especially the two series, the standalone complex series, which is, I think, better than the films. People put the films on the pedestal, but the TV series are better. if you've not watched them, I can heartily recommend them.
I really liked the first film. I didn't so much care for the second.
Yeah, no, the first film is good. The second film is really, really postmodern up its own arse, I would say.
Yeah.
So much of that film that's like, we're going to do this sequence just because it's pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no bearing on the plot, really. It's like overly self-loving. I don't like that film that much, but yeah, the 2 TV series, the second series is really good, and the first series has a very good core plot, but it makes the mistake of doing one-off episodes that are a bit crap and don't really contribute. So you've got to have a little bit of patience with the first season, and the main character, Motoko, she's got a really silly costume, which is like Japanese fan service central that you just have to ignore. Just like, look, it's a cartoon.
Right.
You don't need that in a cartoon. Just give her a normal costume, please, which they do in the second season, and it's much better. but yeah, watch that. You'll see a few PHR things. If you've not watched that series, you'll see some stuff in there, and you're like, oh yeah, that's where that comes from. Like, it's there's a bit of that. Shaltari are quite Mayan. I was going for a kind of Mayan, Inca, Aztec kind of feel to them, but I've always said they're my most original faction. I think, like, there's not really anything else that really looks like Shaltari out there, and I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even race-wise too, not just necessarily the vehicles and stuff, but even the race of Sheltari are very unto their own.
Yeah, giant space echidnas. It was almost a little bit of it. It was like if Sonic the Hedgehog was a real, actual, living biological creature rather than a cartoon. There's a little bit of that there, and but a much more gribbly, nastier, little bite your legs off kind of thing.
Betrayed a brain jelly, evil kind of guy.
Yeah. For Scourge, you're obviously very Geiger. Very Geiger. No, I don't make no bones about that. It's like anyone who tries to do biomechanical, if you're not going to make it Geiger-esque, it's not going to be as good.
Right.
Right.
Like, I know it's a little bit unoriginal, but it's sometimes you have to bow to the inevitable.
And somebody's peaked the genre. It's hard to best it.
Yeah, but also like with the Scourge, I try and focus on the individual designs of the models more and try and make those original. Like, yes, the texturing is Geiger, but the models aren't. I don't think. So I try and work on more original shapes with the Scourge to make them not so derivative, and obviously they're more. Like, if you look at Aliens, they're more mechanical and less bio stuff in Aliens. So it's not quite the same, but yeah, there's a lot of Geiger going on there.
The Oppressor has it sold the Scourge Army to me. I mean, I saw that model. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna buy it just because of that.
Yeah, that one doesn't really come from anywhere specifically. That was just me. Get the shape. That was just messing around with a lot of sketching. Until I came, obviously there's a crab influence there, but
Right.
thing I think is what makes that model, especially those the two kind of, you won't call them horns, but there's a little bit of like stingray going on there as well. So yeah, I usually have a kind of bio mood board for any Scourge model, and then I'll go down the rabbit hole for it and find a shape that I think works, and then go from there.
Is it harder to sculpt this stuff that's curvy like the Scourge is, or is it more difficult?
It's performance issues is what I'll say. Like the Scourge folder of all the CAD models that I've ever done ever, the Scourge folder is bigger than the other 4 factions combined.
Oh wow!
In file size, it's huge, and that means anything you do, like the Scourge Dreadnought, by the time you got to the end of some of the components on there, it's like open sketch, wait, draw line, wait, dimension, wait, type it in, and whereas everything else, I'm like dimension, extrude, and you can get through stuff like that's a Scourge thing. And you also have to work with planes and things. SolidWorks, the package I use, is designed for mechanical engineering more than anything else. So it's very, very good at things like getting lots of parts to fit together and interrelate. Everything's dimensioned, everything size, which is good. But the downside is it's no good at biological, and that's very Scourge. So you're kind of fighting the system a little bit with it. But you know, I've developed a method that works for them, and you can do it. A lot of people who see them are like, "Wow, you do that on SolidWorks? That's crazy." I'm like, yeah, I know, but not in a good.
See Dave brushing his shoulders off. Yeah, I know.
Round hole. It's more like, oh, you tried to pogo stick to France, have you?
I'll ask a straight up nerdy question. What do the system specs look like on the machine that you're running your CAD work on?
It's fairly powerful, but not as powerful as you'd think. 32 gig of RAM, quad core overclocked processor. I can't remember the exact clock speed, but it's pretty good. It's the best overclockers could do me at the time. Lots and lots of hard drive, like 5 terabytes, but that's mostly my photography that's filling up all of that. But the big one is the graphics card. It's an AMD 5 Pro, 700W, I think. Something. It's not a card that gamers would be familiar with because SolidWorks wants specific graphics package cards, and if you don't do it, then you don't get live shadows, and the performance is a lot lower. So you have to pay through the nose for a card that doesn't perform as well as a gaming card because it's a that says, "I am a professional card." It's really annoying, and it's one of those things that I hate about CAD packages, but there you go. But it's a decent machine, and all solid state for the core operating and the main drive that everything is saved on, which I'd never go back to hard drives after that. Never. Way, seriously. Saves me a whole bunch of time every single day. Well worth it.
Well, I'm going to move on to the next question here, Dave.
Cool.
Patrick, the Swedish Giant, asks, how much money or services is it going to require to get you to play at Adepticon in disguise?
You'd probably have to bribe my wife more than anything else. I don't get trips away abroad these days.
So you're saying that she has to come along, or what's the bribe that needs to be applied here?
Cons. She hates cons. I made her help out at quite a few of the early ones. Yeah, she like taking all the. That's what it comes down to.
So I think what he's saying, Don, is that we need to get our wives together so that they can take her out and do something fun and womanly, so Dave can go to the con.
My wife would be gaming, so I don't know. You guys' wives can do whatever they want.
All right.
I do, on seriousness, though, I do really want to come out to Adepticon at one point because I've been to most of the US cons at one point or another, and I've never been to Adepticon. So
He would like it the most, Dave. It's because it's literally all wargaming there. So I mean,
yeah,
everywhere you turn is something you'll want to see.
I've heard it's like Salute, but in America, but it goes on a bit longer.
Even it's more tournament based than Salute. There's tons and tons and tons of events.
There's absolutely no gaming at Salute, really.
It's like the opposite of Adepticon. There's a decent and growing retail presence there, of course, but
it started as tournaments and not retail, and retail just kind of followed along because the tournaments got so big.
Cool. I would like. I need to come out to it at some point. I can't make any promises, but I'll try and wangle it one way or another because I would like to come to Capcom, definitely.
Well, just to sweeten the pot, Dave, there's a Kuma's right down the street.
Oh, I love Kuma's.
It'd be safe to say that the Adepticon basically is home to all of the premier American tournaments for any war game that matters.
Yeah. Nice. No, I need to come out there, definitely.
But yeah, it's also a work schedule issue as well, because obviously right now we're trying to get a whole new book out, and Dave's focused on that. So I was trying to get him out for next year, but bosses otherwise.
Well, I mean, if they hit the April deadline, you could always come to Origins.
Nobody wants to go to Origins.
Come on, man. I'm at Origins.
Origins is fun, but it's like Gen Con Light, so.
Origins is delightful. You quit.
So, but I do like the city, though. I do think Columbus is.
Tom's right though. Like the big one is scheduling at the moment. Like there's a lot of very ambitious plans going on here that I can't talk too much about, and you know, a great deal of the amount of stuff that's needed falls on me. And when it comes to it, like I need to deliver and I need to get stuff done. That's kind of always been priority one this year, especially just getting the work done. And you know, I'm still focused on that and will be for the foreseeable future, but we'll see.
Well, I mentioned earlier our Scourge propaganda officer, Overlord Shivak. He had a spat on the Facebook page for a while where he decided that he was going to hold all of your fluff hostage until you started answering hard questions about the Scourge.
All right.
One of his questions is about Scourge body shaming, and he wants to know how the culture treats the various forms. Like, are invaders treated differently because they're short, fat, and just haul people around, or?
And it was like, is a destroyer more senior than a warrior or whatever?
Right. I mean, are destroyers like the jocks of the Scourge world?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I find it hard to answer that question without getting serious on the fluff, because you know what, it's very weird, but I have actually given a little bit of thought to that, because there would be, I mean, inside they're all identical, they're all the same creatures, they all have the same level of, the same intellectual level, whatever, but a little tiny razor bird is going to be squished by a destroyer.
Right.
You know, so there is a sort of certain, well, who's superior and who isn't. I would actually address that a little bit more at some point in the future. Like there is in seriousness, a kind of hierarchy there. Who gets put where? You know, who ends up stuck in a vehicle, who doesn't. And when you do get put in a vehicle, who gets to pilot an annihilator and who has to be a prowler? I love prowlers, but let's face it, if you had a choice, you'd want to be the great big annihilator rather than the little prowler.
I don't know. Version 2 made prowlers really terrifying.
Prowlers are terrifying anyway. I've always loved prowlers. I always think it's not a proper Scourge army unless it's got prowlers in it. But
They're
like that.
But if we're talking a prowler to a annihilator, then we're
true.
Yeah, if it was one or the other, if it was you know what you would choose. So there is going to be some kind of hierarchy there. But again, yeah, like it's a hard question to answer without being serious.
This moment alone is going to set Josh on edge for a while now. He's going to be like, what, really? I'm looking forward to his response to that. He did kind of follow up with a serious question, though, with I lost it. He's looking for more interesting fluff, especially on like vampires and the creatures that are living amongst the other worlds. Like the Apex Predator came out. I pulled mine off my shelf right above me here. And the first thing we were kind of talking about is how long is it before the Scourge decide to put a jelly inside one of those?
It's absolutely on the radar. That's I can't say when or if, but it's an obvious thing that you may well see at some point in the future. Let's just say that. That and more, because there's a lot of potential there with the Scourge, with all the fauna to really go to town, and they would, because that's a really scary body. You know, they're going to make use of that. If they come across that in the wild, which of course they do, because they control most of the Cradle worlds at this point, they've got that resource on tap, so they are going to use it. And it's a carbon-based life form, so absolutely fair game for the Scourge. Exactly how they would utilize it and what they would do to change it, that one's a bit more of a question, but we'll see. You know.
Kanan asked, how many new units are we looking at with Battle for Earth coming? And then, of course, the question everyone always asks you whenever they see you: new factions?
New factions. Okay, well, for new units in general, it's a stupid answer, but lots. Because I'm probably not allowed to say exactly how many. At this point, I do know exactly how many. What I will say is that I very much doubt you'll be disappointed. There's, actually, drop zone wise, I've been drop zone sculpting more or less exclusively for the last, I think, 3 months and a half, at least. No, probably 4 months actually. I've been doing just drop zone.
Nice.
So there is a ton of. You've obviously earlier in the year there was a lot of new drop fleet stuff, and there is a lot more new drop fleet that you've not seen yet that's going in Battle for Earth. So we're not done with drop fleet by any means. So expect to see some big ticket things that you've not seen yet. But there will be an equal amount of cool stuff for drop zone as well. Like, it's meant to be a dual game book, and it treats the pair of them equally. So there's a bunch of cool stuff, more new miniatures in that book than there's been since book 1, definitely, by a big margin, actually.
Wow.
I would say more than Reconquest of Phase 1 and 2 combined. If you combine the 2 games, something like that, maybe even lots. Fitting in all the new models would be one of the biggest challenges of putting the book together, I think.
Hey, so speaking of new models, monitors, is there anything you can tell us about them?
So monitors, they are still partly under discussion from a rules point of view, but in general, the idea of them is that they're mostly system defense or standoff units, so not particularly fast, frigate-y sized, so not very big, but heavily armored, very slow, so they don't behave anything like frigates or destroyers, but potentially quite powerful weapons, quite inflexible maybe, but that's being very general. There's going to be different ones that do different things, and exactly how they get to the war zone, there might be various scenarios that use them where they're already in place. Because historically, your monitor would be an old slow ship that's been upgunned that gets used for things like coastal defense. But they're not going to behave exactly like that. But they're not big, but they're different and they're interesting, and they'll fulfill a role that you don't really have in your fleet at the moment. So,
are we going to expect to see those in Battle for Earth?
Yes, we are at the moment. That is the plan.
We already talked about long reach team, and you crushed my hopes and dreams again.
We'll see. Long reach team, like, there's a lot of people ask me about this. Like, if we gave them strafe, they would become amazing technical, amazing prowler killers. It does make them very lopsided because either they're decent and worth their points ish, or they're disgustingly good for their points. Strafe, so it's a dangerous one. You don't want a unit that's like overly powerful in some situations and really not in others, and it's sort of, we'd have to charge more points, and then if you're not facing lots of light vehicles, you're not getting your value out of those points.
Right.
So it's a tricky one. Logically, they probably ought to have it, but that's one of those things we can't really do without breaking the unit, I think.
One of the things Rasmus had suggested was taking them from 2 stands down to 1 stand. That way you wouldn't have as many of them on the table.
Could do, potentially. I mean, there are other things we're looking at for Battle for Earth, and being more flexible with infantry in general. Like, you're probably able to take 1 stand of them legitimately and use them in the right kind of way, but we're looking at it,
He was also curious, is there any plans for a PHR transport port that can carry more than 2 stands of infantry?
There may be in the future. It wouldn't be a standard meat crate. Like, you're not going to get an APC that's cheap that can hold 4 stands of infantry. Because that's just not PHR.
I mean, we've got the Nord. I don't really need any other transports at this point. I'm content.
If you do see something that holds lots of stands, think something more along the lines of the Njord or the tilt rotor, something that's big and impressive, but also happens to carry more than 2 stands of infantry. That's the kind of place you would see it with the PHR, an elite, expensive, big ticket kind of model. It makes more sense to me, but
the assault transports have also set a pretty cool little precedence, because you have the tilt rotors doing infantry and the Njord is doing vehicles, but then they're also extremely effective on their own when you're done carrying whatever you're carrying.
Those more like assault transport type things, I do like those. I'd like to see a few more of them.
So would everybody. we're all using those at the moment.
I was gonna say I wouldn't complain about them.
Maybe we should fill out the other factions first before we start doubling up, but
Yeah.
So Michelle is offering Stroop waffles for 3 or more pieces of varying size to build round space stations.
Well, I can always be bribed with Stroop waffles. If you've never had a Stroop waffle, they're a Dutch, really nice kind of chewy, toffee-y, wafery, biscuity things. They're great.
Well, you'll be thrilled to know that.
You can tell I like them, but yeah. So the space station thing. Again, I'm not really sure if I can talk too much about this because there's this kind of thing is very much in my brain at the moment. It's more things that are cross-compatible with the space station kit. Things like big hubs, that kind of thing. It's me being pretty general about it. But it's something I've always wanted to do since I designed that kit originally. I haven't had a chance to do it yet, but I hope I will at some point in the next year, but we'll see.
And you've done that kit so beautifully that it would be really easy to do, like a little smaller box, add-on pieces for it or whatever.
Like, it's screaming out for that kind of thing. It's a modular kit. It really wants other specialist parts to go with it to really add some character to the stations and a bit of bulk, like a real serious bit of chunky bulk there is wanted. So, I want to do it, and we'll see, but it depends on the timing and stuff like that.
Let's see here. Should we be expecting, and I don't know if you'll know this one off the top of your head or not, are we going to see another beta release before we talk about Battle for Earth hitting the market?
We may well. It's not official or anything. It's going to be down to whether it's needed or not.
Okay.
If we feel it's necessary for the end product, if we feel it will benefit things, if there's time to do it, then we will. If there isn't, then we won't. I'm not actually in a complete rules space right now because I've been doing CAD. As soon as I'm done with CAD, I'm going to be on rules, and fluff. Then I'll be in a better position to answer that question. I'd say that's fair.
Don has mentioned this previously in our last episode, I think, about redesigns coming for torpedoes.
Yes, there will be at some point. I like torpedoes mostly as they are, but there's been too many people that whinge about them. So they are going to see a certain amount of redesign at some point. That's all I can say at the moment.
Keep asking you all these questions you can't answer.
And something will be done.
Dave's a bit less naughty than me. I usually talk a bit more.
Yeah, you're easy to get the spit stuff out. New missions and tournament packs. I mean, obviously, probably down the road, but not until after Battle for Earth hits, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm heading this up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Dave kind of passed this off to me a bit, and it's obviously all the missions will go through Dave. Because if we're talking things like monitors, maybe potentially starting on boards and stuff like that, I'll need to know that from him. But if you haven't seen the Michigan GT packs, those were very much test pieces for what we're kind of heading towards in the missions and tournament pack wise. So really shaking things up so it's not just how much crap can you land on the ground.
Yeah. No, this is really important because both games live or die on good scenarios. Like, they're designed to live or die on good scenarios, and it needs more of those. You're going to see a bunch of new missions in Battle for Earth anyway, for both systems. Some of them will be tournament focused, some of them won't be. But yeah, I want to spend some more time on missions, and obviously I've got Don doing quite a bit of work on that at the moment because I just can't. But hopefully, there's some good work being done on them, and if you guys are enjoying them and play them and they play well at tournaments, then yeah, they're going to find their way into the books at some point.
Yeah, feedback from the GT was pretty good on the designs I went through. So, but I think we're going in a good direction with those. And then, of course, with the addition, I think Zone's gonna be real fun doing new mission packs for her because of
Yeah.
we have barricades and forests and all kinds of just awesome fun things.
Stuff like all the new tools, they're all designed for missions. You know, or things that go on top of buildings, forests, barricades, all that stuff. Like, to see them used, they need to be in scenarios. It's like space stations. I mean, basic example, like people who play tournaments for Drop Fleet and don't use space stations, like that's because you're not using the right scenarios. Like, there should be space stations regularly all the time.
Right.
Not in every mission, but maybe at least half or 2/3 of the missions in a tournament should at least have a couple of space stations in them, and that all comes down to missions. Same with forest. If you make forests like there's some fun rules for forests, but none of the scenarios use them, then they won't see any tournament play, and it's pointless them being there.
Mm-hmm.
But you will see them in plenty of scenarios because they're an important change in how the game plays, and they're going to make the boards look a little bit nicer, as well, and variable for different scenarios in a tournament, which is nice. And it just changes things a bit.
Bringing Zone out of the city a bit more than we used to see in the past.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wrote the original rules that you could do those missions before, but you just didn't because it wasn't really geared to competitive play. It wasn't really geared for TOs for it to be easy for them.
Mm-hmm.
And the RuneScape and Cityscape are just so easy. Like, if you're going to run Drop Zone, it's going to be urban, and it's still urban combat, so you're not going to see whole tables of just trees in a tournament, probably.
Oh, yeah.
But you can play whole games of just trees at home, if that's what you want to do, and you'll definitely see some in tournaments. It's important. It brings certain units to the fore that weren't so much before, and that's where variable scenery makes for a more interesting game.
And it's also just even adding those little bits of new scenery have even repurposed even infantry a bit more than what they were used for before. Because we played a couple, like at the G2, we played a scenario where I surrounded a objective, or no, it was a focal point around barricades. And
both.
So the home focal point, people were just leaving their infantry out in the open in these barricades.
Nice.
And so that's a purpose they just would never have even considered using before.
No, that's good. That's exactly what they've been written for. That kind of thing. Because in real battles you do get infantry in the open, providing they've got something to hide behind.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to see whole squads of men walking down the middle of an open street when there are guys with machine guns and buildings around. But if there's a barricade, yeah, definitely.
It's been some time since you've had swarms of infantry out in the open just shooting at each other for no reason.
Yeah. I think we had the very, very first ever game of Drop Zone that was played. We had a lot of infantry in the open in those days, like in original playtest, and the Seraphim's wide area bomb, the one that nobody ever uses, the original version with the large blast. That just placed and it killed about 100 men all in one go. Oh shit! Need to be looking at that.
That's no good.
No, so yeah, but I want to see infantry in the open a bit more and a bit more dynamic use of infantry in general. That's something we want to see more.
So Conrad's massive list of questions here. He also is curious: are we going to get to see some renders of all of these units?
Right. So I'll say something funny here. Like it's entirely not my decision. This. It used to be, and in a way, it probably wouldn't be best right now if I was letting these things out, because you'd be all like, "Oh my god, I want that! I want that! I want that!" and you couldn't buy any of it yet.
So no is what you're saying.
No, but there is a lot backed up. Yeah, like if we were to release it all, everyone would, I don't know, like it might melt the Drop Fleet internet a little bit. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff that I would love to show you. And it's frustrating, but it's coming. you know.
Amongst all that stuff, are there any new ship types for Drop Fleet that we haven't heard any hints about?
There is the mysterious big ticket thing for Drop Fleet in Battle for Earth, which I'm not allowed to talk about. That's still there. You can make some fairly informed guesses on it at this point. But there is something else big. Obviously there are monitors as well, but we've talked about those. There's rules will be printed for ships that have already come out, of course, like the dreadnoughts and things. There might be a few more. We'll see. A lot of it depends on time and how much more I can squeeze out before the book's got to go to print.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what is your process when you sit down to create a new unit? What's that process like?
So it's changed actually quite a bit in the last year, and that's not a bad thing. So in the past, when it was old Hulk, as it were, I would have an idea for a unit most of the time. Sometimes it would actually come from people I talk to at cons, or lots of people asking for something, and then I try and fulfill a need. But I don't often do that. Like I never used to. It used to be a case of just me going, I think we'll do this now. And it was shared with the office, and we would all talk it round. But usually, I would get my way anyway, and then I would just go off and do it, which is a little bit unfocused and is too much me, and that's not healthy when things get bigger. Now at the moment, I'm still pretty much in control of what gets made as far as the games go. It's mostly my decision what happens, and I have the ideas, but then there are more people involved, and we all talk about it. We narrow something down. Like the design process itself is a lot more advanced than it used to be. Like I used to just come up with an idea that I liked, and then just went off and sculpted it, and that was it. Now I'll do some sketches. We'll narrow those sketches down to a short list. I'll retake the short list, re-sketch, bring those down, then sculpt a basic blob shape of that unit, and then we'll refine that a little bit until we're all happy, and then I'll go off and detail it, because as far as hours go, probably 95% of the process is detailing. So when you spend more time on the actual form, then you're still not actually investing that much more time in the overall sculpt, but the quality is better. Good example of that is the Scourge Dreadnought. The Scourge Dreadnought had quite a lot of what somebody who's being just charitable might call studio interference, but the end result is a whole lot better than what I wanted to do in the first place. It took a lot longer to sculpt, but the model is a lot better. So it's a more advanced process now, and we're making better models as a result. So I'm not going to complain about it, because it's good.
It is a pretty ship.
Yeah, it was an absolute pig to sculpt. It was a pig. To be honest, my original design made my life easier, and it would have been quicker. And speed is always nice, and there's always an interplay of speed versus goodness. I could say take the Scourge Dreadnought as it is now, put in another month, and it will be a better model. But does it need another month's work at this point? No, it doesn't. That's just not viable on any level. So there's a sweet spot that you have to find all the time, and there's some people like, speed, yes, speed is good, quality is good, and you have to find a happy place where it fits for everybody, and that's a constant struggle for any company. Yeah, you won't find any company in the world that doesn't do that.
So, how do you feel about the progress of the universe as it stands, like fluff wise? Are you happy with where it's at? Is it progressing how you want?
Yeah, I'm still very much in control of the fluff, and that's good, because I've had this overarching plan for ages. Battle for Earth, I'm so much looking forward to writing that. I've got it all down in my head. It's just a case of actually writing the stuff, and it's going to, as soon as this wave of CAD is over. That's been a book I've been waiting to write for 5 years now, so that's really exciting to get to do that. And then there's a big plan for what happens next, and there is a what happens next.
I was about to ask, is it a climax or is it a new beginning?
It's the climax of this run. So it's, you know, originally there was going to be a Reconquest Phase 3, and then there was going to be this. But the more I thought about it, the more it was like, you know how you've got a TV series that you love, and it goes, say, 5 seasons. There's always a season that's sort of filler that gets you to season 4 or whatever. You know, I kind of felt that was the case with Phase 3. And in the end, it was a case of, well, look, why don't we just get on with it and do the Battle for Earth, because that's what it's building up to. So, yeah, basically, like we kind of skipped it a little bit, but it's not a big loss. And Battle for Earth, we have more time spent on it because it would have had to have been split into 2 books, and they would have been lesser as a result. So what will end up with something that's bigger and better than either of them would have been on their own. So it's good. Where we go after that is going to be a bit more collaborative, I think. And again, that's not a bad thing. You don't do your best stuff in isolation. It's always the case. But I've got some cool plans, and we'll see. Watch this space. But there is there's what's the Battlestar thing? They have a plan. It is that.
Well, I'm sold. I want it.
Cool.
So the last question that's on this list, and we started talking about this before, is the whole kind of reconciling the what you see, what you get of the model versus the fluff. And like it went back, we referenced the long reach teams. We referenced like the because I always talk about the PHR units because that's what I play.
But yeah.
But how much do you run into that? How much is it, what you imagine in the fluff versus what you have to do mechanically, and how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because you want both to work, and in an ideal world, the gameplay performance should match the fluff perfectly. That's what you want, and I try and set out for that always, all the time. But you don't often know how players are going to use units. Probably the best example of this in all of gaming is the average Space Marine army. If we the fluff for Space Marines, like how much arse they should be kicking, lots. They actually are on the table versus that, not very much. The composition of a fluff army versus a real tournament army, worlds apart. You're not going to see a Space Marine company in a competitive game ever.
Right.
It's that sort of thing. So that's an example of how extreme it can get, and you don't want that ideally, but sometimes you can't avoid it completely. So like the way that the Resistance play is a bit trickier because the rules and the fluff are written so that you can really have a real spectrum of different armies. You could play an all military, high cost, low volume kind of army, or you could play a high volume, low cost kind of army, or something in the middle. So there isn't really an intended fluff direction for the Resistance anyway. So any Resistance army you see, you can justify its presence by whatever quirks that particular band happen to have. So they're in a way easier, but also harder because you'll get weird stuff that you didn't see coming.
Yeah, I mean it's hard when you're talking about like a feral list for Resistance, and to make them as truly evil as you make some of the characters, you'd have to do something like a crazy dwarf death roller or some weird machine that would squash a bunch of people for no reason. And
yeah, you've got there's always this kind of how far do you go, and this is Drop Zone has always been hard sci-fi. It's never been like giant steamroller of death kind of game.
It was brought up at length at the Michigan Grand Tournament, though, that the Resistance need a killdozer.
I mean, kind of bulldozer thing makes sense because that's a big, chunky, heavy-duty, armored kind of.
Yeah, wrap a bulldozer in armor and let it go, and that's your killdozer.
Let it go for half an inch a turn.
There was
give it demo 5.
There was some reference to the viral video from, was it, I don't know, mid 90s, early 90s, where the Colorado, the guy just took out like half his town.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. That's what I was on about. Like he armored the cab and filled it with concrete things.
Yeah.
Like it was like the definition of premeditated crime.
Yep.
But you know, these kind of things happen in real life, and that's yeah. Have you guys heard of Ned Kelly?
I don't know that I have.
If we have any Australian listeners, they would have heard of Ned Kelly. He's he's like the Aussie version of Robin Hood, but he killed more policemen. Not really to be lauded in any way, I think, but he ended up having a last stand in his house, and he built himself a suit of armor. This is in the late 19th century. He actually built a proper suit of armor to have a gunfight in, and that's out of his house in a suit of armor, which is cool on every level. So, and again, this happens, you know, so there is scope for crazy, weird stuff in the real world that can make sense, and the Resistance push hard sci-fi as hard as you can push it, as far as, is this plausible? Like the drills, you know, a real drill takes a really long time to get anywhere, but that's not any fun. Sort of, you bend the suspension of disbelief a little bit with Resistance to even allow that faction to exist in the first place.
Those drills moved really fast in Total Recall. I don't know what you're talking about.
There is the fluff that the drills don't actually cut under the battlefield, you know, they just punch through. Like you can imagine there's maybe like a 20 feet of soil and street and things, and that drill just blasts through it. So, you know, I try and build in a kind of realism to it because I don't like completely implausible sci-fi. It annoys me when you see something that's like, hang on a minute, you're saying that ship is 10 miles long and you're buying 200 ground troops? What the fuck? Star Wars is always guilty of this. It's like, you've got this enormous fleet, you've got 100 ships there, they're all 5 miles long. Where's your army? Like, bears.
Someone's got to crew the ship.
And I love that film. I'm a heinous crime in liking it more than the other two of the original trilogy, just because of the space battles are so cool.
Well, isn't the bigger question how you feed that fleet and army though too? Like where's all the food ships that follow along?
Well, you can have like giant hydroponic bays and like protein vats that just make bacteria and turn them into bacteria burgers. I don't think.
Or blue milk.
Soylent Green is rebels.
Blue milk. But yeah, like those like things like the Avenger schematic in the Dropfleet rulebook. Like I try and go into quite a bit of detail with these things, like work out, you know, I even worked out like a planetary invasion at one point, like genuinely, how many troops do you need to conquer a planet?
It's interesting you brought that up. I just listened to Band of Brothers, did the audiobook of it, and they were talking about the D-Day invasion fleet.
Yeah.
And 6,000 ships just from Britain to France. And I'm thinking, Jesus, how many ships would it take to actually invade a planet?
Well, there's the UCM have around 1,000 New Orleans class strike carriers, and that's just that one class of ship, and that's only strike carriers, and that's only the first wave. So you're really going to need around 15 million men, something like that, to take a planet. You know, something like that. Maybe a lot more, maybe a lot less, depending on how populated, how you're going to do it. Are you going to conquer that planet in a year, or are you going to piecemeal go city by city? Depends how mobile your enemy is. If you can keep them pinned, you can just take a place, one area after another, and just wipe them out. So but the numbers are staggering always, and they would still need to be, you know, there's orbital bombardment thrown in there too. So if there's a place you can't take, you just flatten it if you've got no opposition in space. So that's a big part of it. So that's where the bulk landers come in, really, because like you need to put 60,000 men down in one go, bam, with one ship. And you've got to be able to do that, otherwise you just can't get the numbers down. You know, you could never do it with strike carriers. You know, it just doesn't carry enough men. you'd have to have like 100,000 of them, and they'd have to be there for weeks. It's crazy, like when you really look at it. But again, yeah, World War II is a great example. Like the number of certain fighters that got built, you know, they built like thousands and thousands and thousands of certain types of aircraft in the 1940s with 1940s technology and 1940s population. You know, if you've got a whole federation of planets at your disposal and you've got fusion power and all the rest of it, these things are really plausible.
Yeah, it was something, what was it, 23,000 Sherman tanks built over the course of the Second World War?
Something like that. And that's mad. That's crazy. I've been on a Sherman tank a couple of times. It was awesome. So much fun. I've been in a moving Sherman tank and got to traverse the gun and everything on it. That's awesome. That's Jim's friend Sherman Craig. It's amazing. I've had a lot of fun on that. But yeah, just to imagine 23,000 of them is just incomprehensible. All in a field or something, like just seeing that amount of armor in one place. And that's, again, just one type of tank. You know,
there was a story about a German 88 that was holding a road, and they kept sending Sherman after Sherman, and the 88 kept blowing them up, and they ran out of ammo before the Allies ran out of Shermans.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not surprised. There's so many of them. That was the whole argument about whether the Sherman was a good tank or a bad tank. That, like, on paper, a basic Sherman is not a good tank at all. It's got big slab sides. It's a really easy target. It's underpowered. It's got a poor weapon. But crucially, it's cheap, and you've got tons of them. So who cares?
It was an okay tank when it was, you know, matched up against Panzer IIIs.
Yeah, exactly. But not Tiger.
No.
We had the Firefly was pretty good. But yeah, no, this kind of real world logistics is something that I find a lot of sci-fi universes sometimes do big logistics and small logistics at the same time, which is like they make their big logistics too big. Like they have ships that are so large they would have a gravity well. And there's small logistics, tiny, like this tiny little army that's like, that's pitiful, like one stray laser bolt from orbit and they're all dead. But mostly it gets done in Hollywood because of production, obviously. Like, you can't have that many extras, and they didn't have that kind of technology back then. But yeah, it's this big sci-fi versus small sci-fi thing is always been there in the world of science fiction anywhere. But yeah, it's something to watch out for, always. Try not to if I can avoid it.
Well, we're creeping up on 1 a.m. for you, aren't we?
We are, yeah. It's 1:45 at the moment. I was booked in until 1, so I'm all right. And my wife's very much asleep and has been for ages.
Well, before you run out of time, is there anything that you wanted to hit on, or anything that you wanted to talk about?
Let me think. So, yeah, I mean, it's probably the big one is the like where the hell is Dave. Is like I can see that as being a thing because I'm never online and I don't do comments and I don't even watch Facebook that much because if I do then I won't get any work done. It's more just to reassure people that I'm still here and I'm working on this all the time. I like, me personally, I'm pretty quiet about it unless I'm doing one of these things. I'd just rather get my head down and do it. So you're kind of not hear from me for ages, and then you'll see some new toys, and you'll be like, "That's where Dave's been." So that's probably the thing I want to kind of communicate to everyone is working my guts out on new toys, and hopefully you'll see the fruits.
That and the other thing that people, I guess, are going to have to get used to is that TT Combat in general. Obviously, we have a whole suite of games now.
Oh yeah. There's
and not, Zone and Fleet. Just they can't demand 100% of everybody's time as it would have, with Hawk. So,
from the gaming industry, this is a kind of important observation from the inside and the outside. Is like, it's easy for somebody for you to look at a line and a situation or a company that has multiple games and go, oh, this is easy. For these games, you need to do this, and this. And, you know, that company probably knows that too. But the actual reality of doing it is not that straightforward. You know, like if you could click your fingers, Hawk always had this problem, old Hawk. Like, we never had enough people to do the things we needed to do. We never had enough money to do the things we needed to do. We always knew what we needed to do, but just could never do it. It's a frustrating thing because people go, oh my God, why haven't you done this? I'm like, well, I really wanted to, but just couldn't. You know, and that's because you've got, it's a competitive industry. It's hard. You can never have a surplus of staff. You can never have a surplus of production. You know, all these things have to deliver all the time because it's hard. You know, I know that very well. So everyone's doing their best, but yeah, you know, things like the Carnivale book, for example, it's a beautiful book. A ton of work has gone into it, and that's cool. It means that a lot of work hasn't been done on some visuals for Drop Zone and Drop Fleet, but it will be done in future. Like Don said, you know, seeing that book should give you some confidence about future Drop Zone and Drop Fleet books. You know, that when that resource is directed towards this, you'll see results. That's a resource Hawk never had. You know,
I know Lewis commented at Gen Con he was thrilled about having access to Patrice, and he tapped him for some Carnivale art. And
oh yeah, no, Patrice has been Patrice, you've seen even less of his work. Like you've seen almost none of his Drop Zone, Drop Fleet stuff, and he's done tons. Like with this book, there'll be more good artwork in Battle for Earth than all our other books combined. There's a lot of filler artwork, especially in phase 2, I think, that I wasn't that happy with, but in the end it was a case of it's got to go in or we don't print. And it's like, okay, fine, it goes in. You know, it's like, I don't really like that piece, it's a bit boring, but sod it, we've got to print it. You know, old Hawk had to do that because we were a smaller company. But now, you know, that they've really given Patrice a lot of time to do a lot of really good work. I'm really happy with it. He's getting better all the time. He's a unstoppable perfectionist, and that's frustrating sometimes because he never wants to move on to new pieces. But there's a lot of cool stuff. So, you know, definitely, I hope you won't be disappointed with the art. But I work quite closely with Patrice when he's doing art for Drop Zone or Drop Fleet. So we're a kind of creative pair on that, and I kind of give him a brief, and he goes off and beats it usually, one way or another, or does something I don't expect him to in a good way. But yeah, there's a ton of cool artwork coming. I think art's really important for any system to really be of a high level. If you don't have good artwork, you know, you're an also ran, I think.
Right, you can describe all you want with words, but nothing beats a good visual, especially for a universe that's nobody knows anything outside of what you create for it.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's still a young universe, and there's still an awful lot of the canvas that's blank at the moment. You know, like I would love to just write and create more things for it all the time, and there's never enough time, and that's just how it is. You know, that's life. The clock is the ultimate enemy of any creative person, and that's always going to be the case forever.
Right. I mean, you're doing it full time now, and you're still not done with the next book's worth of stuff yet.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I don't have any of the company stuff to worry about anymore. You know, like I used to really get bogged down in that stuff, and there would be weeks when I would do almost no sculpting. You know, like that's not happening now. You know, now it's just brain to computer all the time, which is cool. But yeah, some of the sculpts have been really, really ambitious and have taken a lot of time. You know, stuff like the Dreadnoughts, they were great, but God, they were a lot of work. There's a bunch of that going on still, and that's cool. And that's things I've wanted to do, and I could never have done it. I don't think with Old Hulk, I just wouldn't have been able to. Like, even the Dreadnoughts, it would have taken me, instead of I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months to sculpt them all, it would have taken 6 months or a year in the old days, and that's just not viable for 4
Right.
You know, so it's really cool that I'm getting the chance to do the big stuff. but the big stuff does kind of consume me utterly. But hopefully you'll love it. The stuff you've not seen as much as the stuff you already have.
Oh, I thought someone was going to talk.
Comfortable pause.
Right? I got really long.
Well,
Well,
guys, maybe at this point.
yeah, it's just about to move into the final thoughts. Do Don or Jordan, do you have anything that you'd like to ask Dave directly?
I get to talk to Dave quite a bit, so I'll leave it to you two.
I know it's funny when he was talking about people thinking he was dead. I was like, well, I'm kind of spoiled. I talked to Don enough to know that he's busy. So,
Yeah.
Jordan, did you have anything?
No, I don't think I have anything specific.
All right.
Cool.
Well,
Cool.
I guess one thing, since you guys aren't going to say anything.
Man, I've been
Point about it.
talking half as much as Dave, so you guys can throw your voices in.
So we did talk about creating units, and for that topic, I kind of also wanted to dive into also not just how do you create it visually, but where do you start when you're looking at like right now, since we have a whole suite of units. I mean, the game's 5 years old. There's lots of units for it. Like, where do you say, okay, we need new stuff, obviously, because that's how we make money.
Yeah.
Where do you start pinpointing when you look at a particular faction?
Good question. So it's not always the same way. So sometimes it's informed by rules. I mean, most of the time it's informed by rules. Sometimes it's informed by something cool that I want to do. Putting it in a really simple way. So things like the Dreadnoughts. The Dreadnoughts probably fall into the second category a bit because the game didn't need them per se. Battleships were the big ships, and they're still big ships, but they're not Dreadnoughts. So that's creating a whole new thing that the game doesn't have, that is a whole new addition. Then you've got stuff like the opposite end of the spectrum, which is, the Resistance could really do with a unit that does this, or there's really a lack in this faction about this. Sometimes that's deliberate, because what you don't want is a situation where every faction plays the same and has the same choices, and more or less they're just different shaped versions of the same model. You do not want that in any game, and I try really hard to avoid it, but the more models you have, the harder it is to avoid. So usually it's a case of you think of some concepts for units and then you start sculpting, unless it's a really big new thing like the Dreadnoughts.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I've been enjoying since I'm a part of the process more now than I used to be is when I'm looking at something new, the way that Zone is laid out, you can pick a category that a faction is lacking, and it doesn't have to mimic something that the same category has for another faction to fill in a void.
Yeah, it's that kind of, we don't have enough heavy choices, or the heavy choices we have don't really feel that heavy. Like something even as vague as that. A lot of the time it will start like that. It'll be kind of old, PHR could really use another support choice because these get taken like this, these get taken like this, and that leaves a hole for something like this. And then you examine that gap in the line and you think about how best to fill it while still being PHR, for example. That's usually how it goes when it comes, especially for Drop Zone. Drop Fleet is a little bit freer because any ship will kill other ships one way or another. And unless it's something specialist like a troop ship or a bombardment ship, it's going to be a ship that kills other ships to some degree or another. So you could do a lot of different things, and it's got to fit within the faction, and it's got to not be something that already exists because that's pointless.
Yeah.
Drop Zone is like, both games are finely balanced, but Drop Zone, especially if you dropped in something that's just wrong for a faction or just wrongly balanced or whatever, it can really screw that system up quite easily. So it needs to be done carefully. And I also try really hard to have what you see is what you get on everything. Most of Drop Fleet, like those UCM turrets is a good example. Like I was dead set when I made the UCM that look, this turret is 2 dice on 5s. This dice is 2 dice. This turret is 2 dice on 3s. It will always be 2 dice on 3s. And that's that kind of thing I'm pretty set on. Like the London kit has so many dice because it has so many turrets, and yeah, you could pull them and make them like, oh, these 4 turrets are 2 now, but you only get 4 dice. But I don't like that. I try and avoid that if I can. You know, and again for drop zone, like you see a massive, great big railgun that looks like an anti-tank weapon. That's because it is. Most of the time. Sometimes you get some freedom, like occasionally with drop zone, I'll design a model with a weird esoteric energy weapon. And well, that, if you want to change the rules further down the line in playtesting, you can, because it's an esoteric energy weapon and it could do a whole range of things. So there is a bit of that as well. You got to be flexible.
Speaking of giant railguns, I just want to personally say thanks for the Tiamat. I needed that.
Cool, good. I enjoyed that. Just nice big. That was a nice, straightforward, good. Everyone loves a big railgun.
Mm-hmm. Or 2.
My strategy against the Tiamat is to completely avoid it.
Yeah, completely avoid it. Just like, don't let it shoot you.
Yeah. So and then
they don't like Panthers in the open. I'll say that.
No, well, it's the ultimate foil to it, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything fluff-wise, Dave, that you've done so far now that you wish you could have reimagined a little bit more now that the game's so far in?
That's a good question. I think, I don't know, a lot of it is just there isn't enough. Like, I've still got a lot of freedom because there's a skeleton still. Now, I've always described it as fleshing out the bones. You know, the original core book is a complete, like, bare skeleton. You know, now it's got a layer of muscle on it, perhaps, but definitely not skin. So I've still got a lot of room to move around. I think I would have defined the Scourge better earlier, maybe, and the Sheltari, actually. And one thing that I get asked a lot, and I really want to do more of this, is fluff from other factions' perspectives.
Yeah.
It's nice to have everything from UCM because they're human and you can empathise because they're like you, more or less. And that's very, very deliberate. But also, I think it's high time that we see more about things like PHR homeworlds, Sheltari homeworlds. You know, what do they do on the home front? Because you want to know. You know,
Yeah.
That's the skin that I'm talking about. That's kind of all those extra things that you don't need for a tabletop game, but you want. I want that stuff to be there.
Hopefully, with Battle for Earth being as big as it is, it'll tie people over for a while that you can then invest a little bit of the time in something like
exactly like that. I mean, you're obviously Battle for Earth, for example. That's not about the PHR homeworlds, so don't expect a ton of that there. It's about Earth at the end of the day. But really, Earth is a new front anyway, fluff-wise. Like, yeah, it gets talked about a bit, but not much. It's been this kind of distant prize in the previous books.
Yeah, at this point, it's almost a Scourge world.
Right, no, yeah, basically.
Well, yeah, you're
all like
160 years since you've last seen it, so.
Lion's Den, Earth. You know, it's the like definition of a hard nut to crack. So, you know, it'd be one hell of a battle. Makes all the others look pretty feeble by comparison.
Right, and you consider the daunting task of you said about 15 million men to do a planet. This is also how many years or how much time has already passed in the war. So to muster up at least 15 million for Earth seems like quite daunting.
Yeah, and you've got to logistically get that bulk of troops in place, and you've got to deliver it to the surface, and you know, avoid being wiped out in space before you even manage to drop. There's there is a reason why the Battle for Earth happens at this point in the fluff, and you'll see that in the book, because if you read Phase 2 doesn't give you the impression that Earth is really anytime soon, and at that point it isn't. But you'll see anyway. There's a chain reaction of things that occur that make Earth possible, because it isn't possible at the end of Phase 2. You know, you look at it and you go, no, that's not happening. Earth's impossible. You know, we'll think about that later, but things change. You know, much changes in war quite fast.
Did he just drop a giant teaser on us?
Mm-hmm.
Little bit vague, but you can have a think about that. But there's yeah.
That won't spark any debates or arguments, I'm sure.
There is a plan. There's always been a plan, and the plan's not really changed at any point. So I'm just getting to do it at last. That's all.
Well, we've officially hit the 1 a.m. mark for you. Guys, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think this is a lot for people to digest. So here, let's not drag it on too much longer.
Yeah, we're creeping up on the 2-hour mark pretty quick here. So
I want to thank Dave and the overlords at TT Combat and letting Dave visit with us. It was an awesome time, and I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy hearing your voice. So thank you from the entire community.
I'd like to do a few more of these as well. Like, I've got myself all set up for this now, so it's something I want to do a bit more regularly. So this is.
I suppose we can have you back.
Guys are up for another one at some point. I'm very much up for this, and yeah.
Yeah, so we're the officially unofficial. I mean, obviously now the second member of TT Combat has joined us. I'm doing this regularly.
Yeah.
And so I think we're gonna do a little round table guest appearances here. I think we're gonna try and shoot for maybe getting Lewis out to talk about Carnivale next, and then maybe Louis could come out and talk a little bit about TT Combat in general and where it all started, and get people more background on the company. And then
that's its whole own story. You know, I mean, he's got a hell of a job to do. I know that. You know, I did what he's doing on a much smaller scale, so it's a whole thing for him. And yeah, Lewis, because obviously I'm not really qualified to talk about Carnivale that much.
Right. Yeah.
He absolutely is. So yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, we're just bigger now, you know.
And then maybe some new things for the company that we can talk about. Obviously, Louis, being the owner of all this, doesn't have nearly as much time as we would to devote to this. I mean, getting a half hour out of him would be good.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but and then maybe around Battle for Earth time or just before it, we can let the TT Combat guys talk. Let us talk a little bit more about the book before it officially hits.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm looking forward to a time when I can actually start talking about all the new stuff that you don't know about yet. That's once I'm let off the leash there, then I'm looking forward to that.
Well, if you decide you need to get on here or you want to get on here, don't hesitate to let us know.
Yeah,
we're happy to have you on anytime you want to come on.
Let's talk kind of general gaming stuff anyway as well. Like, I know I've been on about a bunch of non-TT, non-drop zone, drop fleety stuff, but I think that's nice to do as well.
Yeah, and the more we get Dave on, the less we have to bombard him with zone and fleet every time.
Right.
I always want to talk about zone and fleet, but yeah, other stuff too. You know, I'm a general sci-fi nerd, so all this stuff is good.
That's the beginning of this podcast too, so we're kind of still taking the training wheels off a little bit with introductory stuff.
Yeah.
So we can't go off on tyrants just yet because people don't know us well enough yet, but we'll get there.
Cool. Right.
All right, thanks, Dave.
Crash time.
See you soon, bud.
Thanks for spending the evening with us, Dave.
No worries, guys. Thank you.
All right, Derek, you want to take us out?
Yep. Just for the final thoughts, Ohio players, December, we're not sure. We'll either do another Toledo Day or we'll do a Columbus Day. It'll kind of depend on where players are at, but there will be a scheduled play day sometime in the near future. Please subscribe to the podcast and review it on whatever media you're listening to it on, and share to help build our sphere of influence and get us out there a little more. Don, Jordan, as always, thanks for hanging out, and especially Dave, thanks for staying up stupid late to chat with us about games and everything else.
Cool.
All right, later, guys.
Have a good night, guys.
Bye.